I'm going to be talking to us about, I've changed the title, I can't tell you how many times, but Beyond Outcomes. And I'm actually going to start talking about the character of Joab in the Old Testament. So how many of you would you consider yourself pretty familiar with Joab's story? I know you are. Yeah. I kind of want to paint you a picture of this guy before we dive in too far. I always thought he was a pretty impressive figure through the reign of David. He was King David's cousin, and he becomes the general of David's army. And I would describe him as a man of valor, a man of action, David's right-hand man. And he would be somebody that I would choose for my team. You know, if I was going to have to set up somebody to take charge and do some things, but he was a doer. He was a get things done kind of guy, and he was definitely a fighter. And he came from a family of fighters. So him and his brothers were all considered very mighty men, and it's really, improbable things. However, as most of the time, I recently was reading at the beginning of 1 Kings, and something stuck out to me that hadn't caught my attention before. So to set the stage a little, David is dying, and he is passing on words of wisdom to his son Solomon. Before he leaves, he's given him some instruction, right? So who to trust, who not to trust, what's going on, what needs to go on from here. So 1 Kings 2, 5 through 6, and this is the New King James Version. Says, moreover, you know also that Joab, the son of Jeruah, did to me, and what he did to two commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner, the son of Ner, and Amasa, the son of Jether, whom he killed, and he shed blood of war in peacetime, and put the blood of war on his belt that was around his waist, and on his sandals that were on his feet. Therefore do according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. My immediate thought was, whoa, hold on, what? Why was there no consequences of his actions before now? For everything I've read, he seemed like he never lost steam. He never lost his position as commander of the armies. And he basically was allowed to have matters of say in the nation. Like, he still seemed a reputable guy. Yeah. So much, in fact, that whenever they started transitioning from David to put a new king in place, he was one of the ones they called on to get his final say to kind of transition this new king. Now, it wasn't Solomon. He made some poor choices. But I thought it was interesting that he had that kind of reputation, that people thought what that guy says matters, what that guy says should go. And so in 1 Kings 2 and 28 through 33, again, New King James Version, the news came to Joab, for Joab had defected to Adonijah. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but this is the person that they had set as king, though he had not defected to Absalom. So Joab fled to the tabernacle of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. And King Solomon was told, Joab has fled to the tabernacle of the Lord. There he is by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, saying, go, strike him down. So Benaiah went to the tabernacle of the Lord and said unto him, thus saith the king, come out. And he said, no, but I will die here. And then the king said to him, do as he said, and strike him down and bury him, that you may take away from me and from my house of my father the innocent blood which Joab shed. So the Lord will return his blood on his head, because he struck down two men more righteous and better than he, and killed them with the sword, Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa, the son of Jether, the commander of the house of Judah, though my father David did not know it. Their blood shall therefore return upon the head of Joab, upon the head of the descendants forever. But upon David and his descendants, upon his house and his throne, there shall be peace forevermore from the Lord. Yeah. So I know we've all heard the saying, the ends justify the means. And I definitely felt like this applied here. So Joab had a really great run, but he really thought that his ends justified his means. Right. That saying is used to describe that a desired result is so good or important that any method, even a morally bad one, may be used to achieve it. All right. Joab thought that the outcome seemed to prove or justify And there was no immediate consequence for his actions, so he thought he was fine. So I'm going to tell you, or kind of lighten the mood a little bit. I used to have to go to an executive meeting. I was a vice president for a healthcare company, and we would invite, it was on a Friday morning. You had to be there by 8 o'clock. You were kind of poked fun at. It was a small group of people, but they would be like, you're running late again, all this other stuff. And the CEO would take notice if you were not in the room at a certain time. So I'm in traffic, and I live in Fannette, so I'm headed from Houston area to Beaumont. And it's back-to-back traffic. There's no place to go, right? And I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to be late. And I notice this guy is tailgating me behind me. And I'm like, what is this guy's problem? There's like 50 cars in front of me. I can't go any faster. And I thought for even a quick second, I recognized him, right? So I'm looking, and this guy's got these shades on and stuff. And I was just like, that guy looks so familiar. He cuts across traffic to the shoulder and starts passing people like 80 miles an hour on the shoulder. I'd never seen anything like it. It was like NASCAR. And literally starts passing people. And as he does this, I see our corporate headquarters sign on the side of the car. Harbor Healthcare System. I was just horrified. I was like, oh no, I do know him. Oh my goodness. And all I could think of is if he hits one person, this is over with, right? Like this is so bad. But in his desperation to get to the meeting on time, he literally, now, of course, he beat me there. Can you not imagine, right? So he's going, 90. And I was so flabbergasted because in the entirety of me driving, I'd never seen anybody do that before. I mean, he broke like 15 laws. Yeah. And, there's dust flying from him cutting off people and just, he's on the road, on the grass and stuff. You know what I'm talking about before all the construction. So I show up to the meeting, and everybody's like talking about how he beat me there, and also he has no idea I saw him drive, right? Like no clue that I saw how illegal and how horrified the CEO would be if he knew this guy's driving not just driving his own car, he's driving something that has your name on it, that literally everybody can see that you're a company vehicle, in healthcare no less, which is quite funny. But it's interesting to me that he thought that he made it there and did what he thought his expectation was. He made it to Houston, from Houston to Beaumont, and made it on time. And that's all that mattered to the guys in the room, right? Like that's what mattered. So I debated within myself, like, do I say something? Because like if he has a 5-car pileup and it's our company vehicle, they're going to wish I had said something. So I finally went to the COO and I said, look, I need to tell you something that I saw. And he almost didn't believe me. It was like he thought that I was making it up because, see, he looked real impressive he showed up on time, he looked a certain way, everything. But he drove, his actions outside of that room, not at all aligned with the person that they were seeing. And all I could think of is he's cutting corners here. He's probably cutting corners in your business too. There's probably unethical practices happening. This wasn't just like reckless going above the speed limit. This was absolute and utter chaos that you saw. And all I could think of is he's going to kill somebody, right? Like this is how reckless the driving was. And I can't help but think the same thing here with Joab. We all have ways of thinking that certain things are right? He thought it was better to show up on time for the meeting than to abide by the law. Yeah. And even Joab counseled David many times. He knew right from wrong. Yeah. There wasn't a question of whether or not Joab knew what he should and shouldn't be doing. So he still wanted to pursue his own ends. He wanted his way. And so he kills Abner in retaliation for Abner killing his brother during a time of war. So David, in response, gets very, very upset. So 2 Samuel 3:30 through 34. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, slew Abner because he had slain their brother Ashel at Gibeon in the battle. And David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, rend your clothes and gird with sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David himself followed the bier. And they buried Abner in Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented over Abner and said, died Abner as a fool dieth. Thy hands were not bound, nor thy feet put into fetters. As a man falleth before wicked men, so fellest thou. And all the people wept over him. So Abner was Saul's army captain, and he had just come from making peace with David. He had literally accepted that he wasn't just going to be the king of Judah or Israel, but both together, right? Like, so he was basically making a league with him. He was pledging his allegiance to him. However, Joab could not forgive and went after Abner without David's consent and killed him. He does it very, very wickedly. Like, he doesn't know that he's after him because, again, this is not a time of war. It's a time of peace. And even though David condemns his actions, he does not repent. It's not recorded here that he ever shows any kind of remorse whatsoever for killing Abner. I think he thought he was right. Interestingly, he had done this before in killing the previous commander of David's armies, Amasa. Amasa had been instructed by David to go gather the men in 3 days, and Amasa was running late. Who'd like to be killed here every time that you were running late? Woo! So, only one time. So to hurry things along, Joab comes across Amasa and decides to kill him and take control of the armies of the king. I truly believe Joab was like, I'm done with this guy. He's not doing a good enough job, because he sneaks up on him and acts like he's going to greet him, kind of what he does to Abner, and stabs him. And it's so interesting to me that this becomes like a thing. Joab only really knows how to deal with conflict in one way. Kill him, right? Pretty much. So he's hurrying. He decides to kill him and takes control of the armies of the king. Now, interestingly enough, Joab clings to the horns of the altar, and all I can think is, at the very end, Joab, you should have lived here. Daily consecration and self-sacrifice should have been a part of what you did, but it wasn't. Now you're going to die here instead of being able to live on the altar. He never inquired of the Lord if he was doing anything righteous. See, outcomes were more important to him than actually living a righteous life. Yeah. And so you think about when you contrast David to Joab, David made many mistakes. He actually murdered someone as well. And you see two men of action, you see valor, and you see men of war. So many similarities, except when David wants to act, he asks God for direction. Mm-hmm. I never find one time, and many, many times that Joab is mentioned, that he ever inquires after God. Joab proceeds without God's guidance. When David makes errors, life-changing errors, he repents and seeks God. Joab continues to feel justified, and there is no record of him ever feeling bad about Amasa or Abner. And not only that, until he realizes his life is at stake, he never even tries to plead his case with Solomon and make things right. So, to give you a little bit more perspective, it's not just about Joab, but I was really dealing with a situation that continued to bother me. And I know that this happens to us sometimes, where we see a method, or we see, the end result seems to be good, but you can't figure out why the stuff that happened in the middle happened, right? So I prayed. I was like, Lord, maybe it's my spirit isn't right. I just started, talking to God about it, and this went on. And so finally, I just asked the Lord, I was like, why can't I just let this go? Why does my spirit feel troubled about the means? Like, I'm upset that I can't just dismiss it, but my spirit is troubled. Like, I can't quite, am I being too harsh? Am I being judgmental? And the Lord brought a scripture to mind, Numbers 26-12. And Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they fell upon their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared unto them. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Take the rod, and gather thou the assembly together, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak ye unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock, so thou shalt give the congregation and their beasts drink. And Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock, and he said unto them, Hear ye now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, Because ye believed me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. So this incident always upset me. I perceived it as such a small mistake of not speaking to the rock. But in this situation, the Lord really started to show me something. He said, despite Moses and Aaron's disobedience in the method, he still gave water to his people. Yep. Miracle still happened. Yep. The method was wrong, but God, out of mercy, still let the outcome happen.
Right.
And so I wonder if the same thing could have happened with Joab, whereas if he had gotten correction right then and realized you made a mistake here, if he would have repented in the same way. But it was an act of mercy to his people, not a reflection of justification for the leader. Not only did Moses disobey by striking the rock, but they also spoke to the people out of frustration, an authority they did not possess. He said, Must we fetch you water out of this rock? In other words, not God, but me and Aaron are going to be doing this miracle. And God was not mentioned in the miracle. The glory of the miracle was not given to God. To those that saw the water flow, they were completely unaware of the mistake that had been made. The congregation didn't know. They're just glad there was water, right? They probably thought, good job, Moses. Good job, Aaron. But not only that, they had just left a prayer meeting. This is how easy it is. They just left the presence of God. They had just gotten instructions specifically. But what had happened was they got real familiar with the feeling of being in charge, of being in some kind of authority. It can be in your home. This isn't just about the church. This can be at work. We start breaking rules and start doing things that are unethical. And I'll tell you this message, I told my husband, I said, I was very convicted because there's no telling how many times I've cut corners and done things that were not right. And because I didn't get caught or because the outcome still paid off, did I repeat those things and think that's all right? Did I become complacent and think that it's all right to do a halfway situation? And so I guess what was so interesting to me about Moses and Aaron is their consequences were pretty immediate, which was very upsetting. They had just heard God's voice. They had just left his presence, yet they acted out of their humanity. And I think this happens so often in our own lives where we will see where God is so merciful and works something out despite our bad behavior, despite our shortcomings, and we'll somehow think that that's an excuse to kind of keep going that way. Someone here today is being called to focus on God's way of doing things and not pursue just outcomes. Outcomes are God's handiwork. Yeah. And the moment we start believing we have a better way or that we can make it happen, regardless of how we get there, something dies spiritually. Proverbs 16:25 says, There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Without his word, we are nothing. Yeah. Without his direction, we will wander right off the path. Without a daily altar, we will be subject to it in its end. His word will judge us, not the opinions of others, not the victories or outcomes, achievements or commendations. You see, without his word, I'm completely and utterly lost. Nothing I say will have any effect or purpose. It's meaningless. Matthew 7:21 and 23. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works. That's some pretty great outcomes. Mm-hmm. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. He that doeth the will of the Father. That's what he says. Those that will do God's way and submit to his will. I always thought of the scripture, honestly, as referring to those that just didn't have full truth, or they were purposely evil or wrongdoers. But here it looks like it was those that didn't glorify God in their pursuit of outcomes. We did it the way we wanted to have it done. We may cut some corners and take some shortcuts, and we think as long as the ends look good, that we're okay. So this actual verse, Matthew 7, speaks on how we should conduct ourselves in everyday life, direction on pursuing righteousness. And it was heavy, heavy, heavy on how we treat others. Is whenever Moses and Aaron, he didn't glorify God in the miracle, I wonder sometimes if the act of taking things on ourselves and believing that we are within ourselves, even though we know right from wrong and we do those things, if we're not allowing God to be our corrector, do we ask for adjustment? Do we have an altar in our lives? Or do we continue to work, but it becomes iniquity? And when we start to see great outcomes that we feel like we're a part of, and God's still moving, and not realize that's the mercy and grace of God and not a reflection of us being okay with our bad behavior. I can't mistreat you and then expect a great outcome to serve as repentance for that. They're not exchangeable. Yeah. It broke my heart to see Joab have such a horrible end, because here's this man that could have had a legacy of greatness, but because he chose he wanted his own way. He didn't want to go after the will of the Father. He wanted to do it his way. These people that he's talking about, they're casting out devils, they're prophesying, they're doing some pretty heavy spiritual stuff. I haven't cast out a devil, I'll be honest with you. But if I start doing things because I'm self-promoting, or because I think that the outcomes are more important than my conduct, I'm going to miss out. I would hate for me to mistake the mercy of God for somehow a deed that I've done. Are we like employees rushing to a meeting, breaking every law on the road along the way with a big old sign that says Jesus on us? I'd hate to think that. If I'm ugly to someone, or it's not just the church we represent, I represent Him. Right. I can't break those kinds of rules and expect God to be like, oh, well, she's still doing this and she's still teaching Sunday school, and they're not exchangeable. Yeah. I still have to have an altar in my life. I don't want to be clinging to the altar in the last end and dying next to it, having never put myself on it. Right. It doesn't ever show that Joab had a love for the tabernacle. He went there because he thought it would save his skin, right? It was a last-ditch effort to try and do this. I don't want to live like that. But not only that, you need to understand that it's so important that we don't lose sight of who we are. You know, Sister Sabrina, you paid me a great compliment last Sunday, and all I could think of is, you wouldn't like me very much without this. You wouldn't like me very much without God. Yeah. I am zero, nothing without this, and if I convince myself otherwise, it doesn't matter what happened. I could get up here and teach you all day. I would be a motivational speaker. It's not worth anything. If I am not clean, if I come before you and I don't have an altar in my life, might as well hang it up. If I can't live by this, I am worthless. We love outcomes. We like to see results, but not at the expense of your soul. Don't start experiencing things and wanting to push things and manipulate or say things out of ugliness, and your house is a wreck. We have to line up with this. It doesn't matter how impressive an outcome looks. If it was done in certain ways, it's wrong. God, over and over again, how many times I read today where Paul says, he that soweth is nothing. He that watereth is nothing. God's the one that does the work. He's the one that brings the outcomes. And we start taking credit for that. I had a lesson that I taught, this was months ago, and as a human person, I immediately was like, well, the response wasn't that great, and this, and this. And the Lord said, Did you teach what I told you to? Yes. Then what are you doing trying to assess it by somebody else's? And I said, okay. But we do that to each other. We judge and we try to think that is it line upon line? Is it precept upon precept? Am I doing what I'm supposed to? Am I living according to this? Or am I living because I want your approval and I want your praise? Because that's short-lived. This is but a glimpse of what could be. I don't want to be Joab, where I could have been, but I chose not. And I chose not to have an altar in my life. And I chose not to do those things. You know, it took Aaron straight up the mountain and took all his royal robes off of him, his priestly garments, and gave it to his son. It's pretty immediate consequence for what happened. Yeah. And I said, Lord, what in the, that seems so extreme. But it was deserved. Even though Moses didn't even get to, how many years did he stay in the wilderness and he didn't even get to see the promised land? Yeah. Our conduct is so important. Letting God be our corrector is so important. Every time we pick this up, I'm going to say like Brother, what is his name? He says, Brother Hughes. I almost said Brother Howard for some reason. Brother Hughes would say, it should bloody us. Every time we pick it up, it should cut away something at us. We should allow it to pierce us and say, hey, do you remember when you did this? We need that it's a two-edged sword. So easy to use it on other people. It's so easy to use it for the lost and to try to defend ourselves. But when we have that private time, are we letting it cut us and say, hey, you see this? We need to fix that. Mm-hmm. We need to work on that. We need to look at those things, because if this isn't a corrector, something will be. Yeah. And I don't want that consequence. I don't want my kids to repeat it. It talks about the house of Joab, and he says, this is going to be for generations. Because you couldn't find an altar? Yeah. Because you couldn't live according to the conduct? I know that this is a very heavy message. It was very, very difficult for me to take in, because again, I know every day I need to repent. I don't have everything just right. And it is very, very tempting to start looking at just outcomes. Let's do this because this will work this way. And in our own lives, again, at work and other things, we can easily start cutting corners and not realize that, is this how Jesus would have done it? Yeah. Is this how I'm supposed to be acting? Ethics are tricky these days. Everybody's rewriting them all the time. You need to know what's in here about how we conduct ourselves. You can't just go by the company line. You need to realize, hey, there's a right way to do things. And I think that in the end times, it's going to be real easy to be misled by outcomes. You're going to want to look a certain way, and you need to let God work that out. Yeah. The outcomes are His. Mm-hmm. And when we start getting our hands dirty in that stuff, we're going to realize really quickly that I'm the one that's going to pay the consequences. Right? The Lord will reach right over me and out of mercy move and work, but I can't take credit for those things. Right. We have to step way out of the way and say, okay, I only did my part. Are you okay just doing your part? Or do you want it to finish the way you want it to finish? I'm a very type A personality. My mom used to tell me I was a type A ninja, a very quiet one, trying to maneuver things. But we do this. It's our humanity. We want the outcomes we want. We want it to see and perceive. We want a good reputation. But are we willing to do just what God asked us to do and step out of the way? Because that's what's going to be asked of us. Is just what I've asked you to do. Just to go where you need to go. Not to create a dialogue for ourselves or make ourselves a reputation. Because in the end, it's going to affect everything.